Well, good afternoon. I think I'll share a little story about my Mustang, my first Mustang I had. Um, Grandpa bought it for me for my 15th birthday when I got my learner's permit. And it was one of my cars that I've always wanted. The neighbor up the road had it. And every time I saw him, I drooled over it. It was a 70 Mach 1 428 Cobra Jet with a 4-speed and a full louver package, wing on the back, blue and black. It was just an incredible car all the way around. And a couple things. When he sold it to my grandpa, my grandpa paid $5,000 for it, which, in '74, that was a lot of money for a Mustang. I think, shoot, I don't really know off the top of my head, but I think about 3,500 was maybe what they sold for originally. I don't know. Somebody will probably call me a liar or whatever. It don't matter, because if you know, you know. If you want to put it in the comments, go right ahead. I'd appreciate it. Anyways, um, uh, I come home. I think I was working at the dairy at the time. And I come home and there's Charlie's car in the uh, driveway. I go bouncing in to get ready to harass Charlie for the car. You're going to give me my car, Instead, like the Galaxy, Grandpa handed me the keys and said, "Nobody drives it but you." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "It ain't running very well." He goes, "Charlie got in a bad spot, needed money, paid too much for it, but I knew you wanted it." And this way here, we helped Charlie out, and we found out it was because his son, uh, who was a heroin addict, um, overdosed, and it's what it basically took to pay his medical bills for the overdose. And anyways, so I go out and I'm just drooling over the car. I start it up, they run like garbage, man. Only running on like maybe 5 cylinders. Almost burnt the clutch up on it, trying to get it to the barn, And when I got it in there, I pulled the plugs, and 3 of the back cylinders weren't firing. And so I had to shut it off, let it cool, because those things get hot quick, especially when they're not firing. Well, I thought, damn, he blew it up. But I didn't care. I mean, I love the car. So I tried to do a tune-up, tried to change the plugs, and well, you can't get to the back 4 of those things for plugs. There's just not enough room. So there's this old guy down there, Henry. He had his own little auto shop, and he only worked on select vehicles, and he knew he was a good friend with Grandpa, and that was the only reason why he shared the information with me about the car. He told me that I had to take the motor mounts loose, take the bolt out of the motor mount, jack the motor over onto its side to get to the back four plugs. And he said he usually charged Charlie about $400 to do this. And so, with all the things that were going on in Charlie's life, I understand why he loved this kid. It was his only kid. He was in Vietnam, got hooked on heroin. It followed him back to the mainland, and anyways, his son did survive. You heard me refer to Jibo before. That was his boy, and we did everything we could to keep him away from the heroin. But when you got a habit, and there's always somebody there to fill the need. But he never overdosed after that, which was a good thing. And anyways, so I went there and I talked to old Henry about the car, and I didn't want to pay Henry $400 to do it. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I had the money, but it's my car, and I did all the work on my cars. If I didn't know the answer to it, I asked somebody who did, and so anyways, I went home and I took the motor mounts out like he told me to do, and I took the old chain fall and I jacked the motor up, and a few things he didn't tell me I had to do. And being a 4-speed car, when you roll the thing over, the 4-speed, the shifter hit the hole, the factory hole. And so I was left with a couple options, cut the hole out or disconnect the shifter. And if anybody is familiar with that old school cars, it ain't that easy to, it's easy to disconnect them, but it's not that easy to put them back together. It's a pain in the rear, to be honest with you. So that left me a couple different options. But when I had it tilted over like that, I noticed that if I took the tire off, the front tires, I could cut holes in the body, because they're all unibody, and I could cut holes in there, and I could get my spark plug socket through those holes and change the spark plugs. So I buttoned everything back up and I drilled out the holes, and I was able to change the spark plugs, put it all back together, fired it up, and it ran perfect. And I looked at the plugs and you could tell they were old plugs. There's different kind of plugs in the front four and different kind of plugs in the back four. So I was ecstatic then. So then I cut some rubber inner tube and drilled some holes and put some screws into it so it'd seal up the holes. And I had my Mach 1. And like I said, I love the car. That Ford Blue, whatever they called it. I'm not sure what the name of it was, with all the black vinyl stripes and the Mach 1 on the side. The louvers on the back windows were just, and me. I told you I love my 5 slots, and so that was the first thing to come off was the stock mag wheels on it. 5 slots, GT qualifiers on it, and that made that, to me, that was perfect. And the exhaust was good. I did a brake job on it. First time ever doing a Mustang disc brake system like that. With that much horsepower, there's a lot of stopping power needed, and it was all a new learning experience to me, but I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed driving the car, and I drove it when the weather permitted, but I didn't forget my Galaxy, even though it was getting, it had 125, 130,000 miles on it. And back in those days, that's a lot of miles on a car. I think the Mustang I got from Charlie, I think that was about 35,000 miles on it when I got it. Um, um, but the craziest thing was I wrecked a lot of cars. I mean, I did. A lot of cars didn't matter, you know, um, but um, some of them did, like the Mustang, the Grand Sport, um, my Galaxy, uh, my Riviera. Um, I had a few. I liked my Camaro. I drove that until I wrecked it. And my Firebird. I had a '68 Firebird. I had a '68 Cougar. Both of them were really cool, and I enjoyed driving them too. But I, I love the Mustang. I mean, you know, matter of fact, this is the longest I've ever been in my life without a Mustang, and it's been 5 years since I've had a Mustang. And matter of fact, the last one I drove, a friend of mine went to Kona and bought a '66 289 automatic convertible Mustang, and I got to drive it home. Yeah, that may not be much to most people, but it was an honor to me. I mean, here you got a classic car or convertible, and I didn't put the top down mostly because my little ladybug, she didn't like it, so I left the top up. Um, but it ran good. Lots, you know, it was nostalgic. It took me back to the day when cars were something. They weren't what we have now. Um, now I drive an old '86 Isuzu Trooper, um, and it starts up every time, gets me where I got to go, gets me home. Uh, got the little 4-cylinder, 5-speed, 4-speed overdrive, but it'll take me anywhere on the island here I want to go. I mean, it will. The little troopers, that was one thing about them. They're billy goats. They reminded me of the old Broncos, the old ones, 67, 70, on up, until they went big. But those old Broncos, they'd go anywhere too. And I had a few of those. Um, and, but my Mach 1, um, that got me a lot of girls, um, that and, uh, rumors about my cottonseed bed. They all wanted to try it, and they love the Mustang. Um, so I'd go to the school dances, and you know, uh, I, pick up a girl, bring her home, have my way with her, and bring her home the next day. Yeah. Um, I didn't have a lot of girlfriends growing up. I had, I don't know, not very many, but the ones I had, um, I they were around for a while. It wasn't a lot of overnight things, nothing like that. Um, and there was a lot of emotions involved. And anyways, I was coming home from a dance one night. Uh, I think I, I had my driver's license then, so I was over 16, and I'm driving a little too fast. But I mean, hey, it's my Mustang, and I like, I like speed. All my cars, I like them to go fast. And I come around this corner, and I see these two red dots in front of me. I'm wondering what the, you know, before it had a chance to get to my brain cell, what it was. Somebody had left their old Pinto in the middle of the road with no lights on. And I hit that thing about 75, 80 miles an hour. And you know those old Pintos are slanted back? It launched me up into the air, crashed into the bank, flipped back over, and ended up almost in the river. And I got a owie out or cut over one of my eyes. I don't remember which one it is. I can't. I got to look under. But I got that from it. My eye swelled shut. And here it is late at night, bleeding profusely, crawled out of the Mustang. I'm mad because I'm going to kill whoever's in that Pinto. And I get up there to where I hit that car, and the car's nowhere to be found. I'm like, where the fuck did it go? So I'm walking down the road, and this car comes along, and turns out it was one of the people that I knew me and whatnot. And so here I am bleeding like a stuck pig, eyes swelled shut. He asked me what happened. I told him what happened. So he grabs his flashlight, and we're out looking for this damn car. Like I said, I'm mad. If the son of a bitch ain't dead, he's gonna be. Anyways, we found the car. It was probably, I don't know, good eighth of a mile away from where I hit him. Shot that car straight on down the road to the corner and right over the bank by the corner. I mean, that car was mangled, but there's nobody in it. And so he gives me a ride home. And I tell Grandpa what's happened. Wake him up, tell him what happened. And like I said, my eyes swollen and bleeding. So he patched me up, and we jumped in the tow truck and went back and got the Mustang, which was a big job. We got home at dawn. The car was so mangled. And after we went to sleep for a couple hours and got up the next day, we went to get the Pinto because we wanted to run the plate, find out who owned it, And it turned out it was one of my teachers. It broke down. She didn't have the strength because she was just 100 or I think 95 pound, 100 pound, little doll. Anyways, that was her car. It died. She couldn't move it. She didn't think about putting the hazards on. She just got out and walked home, and anyways, so, what can you do? What do you do? I mean, anyways, so now I got a crumpled up car, but it's still got a good motor and transmission in it, and rear end, front end, the parts, and so, like I said, my little Galaxy, it was pretty worn out, the motor wise. It still ran, but I got this crazy idea to make the Mustang live again. And they had the emblems, the Mach 1 emblems on the side of the Mustang, they were real emblems. They weren't painted on or anything like that. So, and it had the Cobra Jet, the Ram Air hood scoop and all that. And I thought, man, I ought to put that 428 in the Galaxy and make a 4-speed out of it. Well, like I said, we had the wrecking yard. So up in the wrecking yard, there was a couple old, I think they were Comets, Mercury Comets. And they had the floor shifting, but I didn't need that. I needed the clutch pedal assembly. So I was able to fabricate that into my Galaxy. So I was able to have a clutch. And in 1963 and a half, they came out with the 63 Galaxy, and they had the 427 side oilers in them, and because they're mostly manual transmission cars, and they're a powerhouse in on themselves. Well, we had a few of those in the wrecking in the wreck yard, in the the wrecking yard there, but there was no motor or transmission in them, and they'd been wrecked. So there was I had parts available, and but down the road from us, oh shoot, gosh darn it, they're in the next little town. There was a bunch of little towns along the river, and they're in the next little town, but they are making booms for cranes out of aluminum. And in the wintertime, because since these cranes were huge, the booms, right, they couldn't build, they didn't have big enough thing. They always had to build them outside. But in the wintertime, they'd cut all the pieces. They'd have all the pieces ready. So when the weather broke, they start assembling it. And sometimes, if the weather was permitted, they get out there and start assembling. Well, I went down and talked to him, and I asked him, I said, we could you make me a frame out of aluminum? And their dad, um, who is a cocky old son of a bitch, not very many people like their dad. Um, he had boys, I think 3 or 4 boys, and they were all doing dad, what dad does, boys did. A lot of that happened, back then. Um, so I pulled a frame out from underneath the Galaxy, and I brought it to him. And I brought the rear end from the Mach 1 with them too. Now that rear end was a lot smaller than the Galaxy, as you know, narrow wise. Well, I like big tires on my car, so that enabled me to have them design the frame to where it fit the rear end, because it was a Posi-Track rear end. Can't remember what they call them. I think it was limited slip or something like that. Anyways, and it was I think a 9 5/8 rear end in that car. It was a big rear end. You couldn't destroy the rear ends in those the Cobra Jets, because they were a lot tougher. They had a lot of horsepower to throw at them. So a Ford 9-inch probably came out in a lot of them, but mine had the big 9 5/8, and so they made the frame for my Galaxy. It cost me, I don't know, a couple grand. Wasn't cheap, but I didn't have anything to spend money on. I mean, I had everything I needed at Grandpa's, and don't my money pretty much went to cars um, and car parts. There wasn't very many places to take a lady out to dinner. You had to, I think the A&W was about the only drive-in, or we did have a drive-in movie show. We did have a theater, but those were all in bigger towns, and we lived, I think it was like 28 miles to the nearest bigger town where it had, well, that's where the gas station was. And so that was pretty much it for entertainment. I think it was $1.25 for to go watch a movie. And like I saw Jaws in the theater, and I probably saw it 20 times in the theater. because there was nothing else to watch. I mean, the drive-ins were cool if you had a girl to take along with you. And like I said, when I was growing up, I mean, there wasn't a big selection to choose from. And I was picky. I didn't want all these hand-me-down girls, which there was a lot of them. And what I mean by hand-me-downs is, everybody, every male in the area had already been with them. And that was something I didn't like. So, anyways, hold that thought. I got to turn my stove off. Oh, it's not ready yet. I'm making salsa. So I'm blanching the tomatoes right now. Anyways, back to the story. So I had the frame out of my Mustang, the steel one, and I mocked up on it to put the 428 in it, and for the transmission crossover, remember. And so when they built my aluminum frame for my car, my Galaxy, they put the motor mounts and the transmission holes, everything in the right places. It took them probably 3 or 4 months to build a frame for it, but it was something they could do inside. Didn't matter the weather outside, and it turned out excellent. I mean, when I got that thing back, I mean, it was nice, and we painted it, me and Grandpa. We thought about leaving it aluminum and just you know spraying it clear to keep it the aluminum color, but when it rains a lot and snows a lot and the roads get graveled, and for the winter time, and then in the spring the rains come, the mountainsides slide down, and there was a lot of that. There was about, I don't know, about a mile of road we called Diarrhea Straits, because the mountainside kept sliding, and they'd clear it out and it'd rain again, and then a big old another mudslide come through. I think a couple of those mudslides actually killed people. I'm not really sure. I know of at least 2 times when they hit, there happened to be some poor soul going through it when it hit. And then you had the rocks, in the wintertime it'd get cold and freeze, rain, then it freeze, it push the rocks, and these boulders bigger than a car would come crashing down over the road. But those weren't the ones you had to worry about. The ones you had to worry about were all the little ones that come down and bust out an oil pan. Matter of fact, that's what happened to my 70 Cougar. I come around the corner and there's a big old rock in the road, and I hit that sucker, knocked out my oil pan. And it wasn't like nowadays you can just run to a parts house and get the parts you need. Oil pans were dealer item only. So then you had to go to the dealer and order an oil pan from them. Hopefully you could get one. Some they discontinued making, so you couldn't get an oil pan for it. I ran into that quite a bit. But anyways, trying to fit, cars that weren't made for that together. And like my GTO, I couldn't find ball joints for it, because there is a wreck judge in the wrecking yard, and I thought it was just quick fit, changeover, because those high-powered cars like that, I found that they had a lot of beefy parts in them. The big block motors, and all the parts were beefier. And so, anyways, After about a year, almost constantly, I finally got my Galaxy back together, the 4-speed in it. Um, what I did was on one of the 63 and a half Galaxies, I cut the transmission tunnel out of it and I put it in my Galaxy and I traced the hole out, and so I'd have it set in the right place, and use the clutch pedal assembly um, out of one of those because the Comet was too small uh, lengthwise. So I finally had my Galaxy put together um, and up and driving, and it was a beast. It was. I mean, that it made that car really, really stand out. And kids, yeah, and I wasn't no exception. And like I said, I had nothing to spend my money on. So I'm going through the old J.C. Whitney catalog. Some of you people may know it. I don't even know if they exist anymore. But you could buy anything for a car through that catalog. And I'm thumbing through it. And here's this 12-inch dual plane manifold for a 428 motor. Big aluminum thing. Shiny, all polished up. And I thought, man, would that look good on my Galaxy? So I did have some luck with the wrecking yard on that, because we had another Galaxy up there, and it wasn't the same color as mine, but I think it was red. But anyways, I pulled the hood off that and cut the hole for the tunnel ram through that. And later on, this guy I ran into who had a auto body shop, I had him paint the hood to match the car. And I think there's, I think I had two 850 double pumping Hollies on there. And there was a guy, I wish he would have showed me, but he never would. But he could take a quadrajet carburetor, and a lot of people didn't like the quadrajets, right? But he could take a quadrajet carburetor, and with a slight few modifications, that carburetor would outperform most Hollies. I mean, and they're not as complicated to work on. I mean, to mount on something like that. And he set me up with a set of those, dialed them all in for the motor, and we started taking it to the racetrack. And like I said, you had to be 18 for them. So Grandpa drove my Galaxy, and he terrorized the people up there. Now, Grandpa was probably mid-50s, maybe 60 at the time. So he wasn't a spring chicken, but he wasn't over the hill yet. And like I said, I think Georgine, that was his daughter, I think she was in her early 30s, and Janelle was in her mid-20s. And so we'd take that car, we'd go down to the strip, brought it in on a trailer, had the big wrinkle walls on the back, pizza cutters on the front. It was a drag car. We set it up, and when I had that rear end built for it, out of the Mach 1 there, I put in my Galaxy. That thing, you could fit. You didn't have to do almost nothing to the car. We had air shocks, so we could just jack the ass end up with the air shocks, and we didn't have to tub it. We didn't have to do a lot of things with it because the rear end was narrow enough to where we could buy the right set of mag wheels and fit it up underneath the car. And it fooled a lot of people. A lot of people thought it was all chopped up and tubbed and all that stuff, and it wasn't. And this was before you had to have a lot of the safety regulations that they instilled. And anyways, Grandpa terrorized people with that car, and it was so funny. Um, we'd go down and go to the big cruising towns, and I just have the GT qualifiers all the way around, Krager mags, and you know people scoffing because we got two 4 barrels sticking through the hood. Yeah, and I didn't always run it like that. I mean, there's a lot of times when if I was going to be tooling it, you know, everyday driver, we'd slap the manifold uh, on quite often. And I bought a aluminum manifold for it, so I just switch out the aluminum manifold and go back to a 4 barrel on the Cobra Jet, so keep it all underneath the hood. And we only put the 2.4s on it on race day, pretty much. But so my Mach 1 lived again, and I took those emblems from the Mach 1 Mustang and I put those on the side of the fenders where they go on the Mustang. I put them on the Galaxy. So everybody's looking at my Galaxy thinking, Mach 1, and it had the shaker hood, and Cobra Jet down the side, and everybody's just kind of shaking their head at me thinking I scabbed it together. Right? But they didn't know. They didn't know it had an aluminum frame underneath that thing. They didn't really think I had the 428 in it. They could see the 4-speed, but back then, you could get 4-speeds for, we had quite a few of them, and I switched a lot of cars from automatics to 4-speeds because I liked 4-speed. But my poor Mach 1, love that car. I crashed it. It left its mark on me, but it lived again in my Galaxy. And that's all I got to say for now on that. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, and God bless you.